This morning, we will be taking another look at the so-called drug war as it pertains to America, but specifically, we're going to be looking at some of America's policy, United States policy, as it pertains to Mexico. Now, for the past couple of weeks, the internet has been ablaze. The mainstream media has been ablaze with WikiLeaks. For those that do not know what WikiLeaks is, it's sort of like a website that was set up for whistleblowers, for those who had information, who either worked for the government or worked in other sensitive positions, corporations, what have you. It was a way for them to leak documents, leak evidence to this website without their names being revealed, the sources being protected, and so that this could, I guess, shine a light on a lot of the things that's going on that I think the citizens of the world, not just the United States, but the citizens of the world would like to know. Recently, in the past couple of weeks, again, as I stated, the news world has been ablaze with these diplomatic cables that have been released by WikiLeaks as it pertains to the U.S. State Department. And so we're going to talk about one particular cable, and this was published by the L.A. Times. WikiLeaks cable revealed unease over the Mexican drug war. The secret cables give a much starker U.S. view of the pitfalls facing Mexican President Felipe Calderon in his campaign against drug cartels. Now, to help us with this, looking at this, some analysis is going to be Jack Cole is going to be my guest this morning. Well, he's on the line waiting, and he is a former New Jersey State police officer. He worked as an undercover narcotics officer for 14 of his 26-year career. Some of the things that I have read about him is that he approaches the war on drugs from several different perspectives, and one of those is that it is a so-called war that is steeped in racism. We have talked about that a lot on this program about how African Americans are targeted in the war on drugs for various reasons, especially in your urban open air drug markets. And so we've had guests on before to talk about that. But he also talks about the violence. He also focuses on the violence that's associated, also the corruption. And so, he is, and I was surprised to read this, but he is one of the founding members of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which started with just 5 members and now boasts over 30,000 supporters. Okay, 30,000 supporters, and probably growing as most of the people that I'm associated with are being exposed to this great organization. So without further delay, let us bring on Mr. Jack Cole. Mr. Cole, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, you're welcome, sir, and thank you for accepting the invitation. I don't think I gave you any justice as far as your extensive experience in this area of policy. Is there anything that you would like to add?
I retired as a detective lieutenant from the New Jersey State Police. I spent 26 years there, and 14 of those years I worked undercover in narcotics. I worked, toward the end, billion-dollar international heroin and cocaine rings, and nothing I did in 26 years had any effect whatsoever on what we call the drug problem in the United States. As a matter of fact, when I started working undercover, it was the beginning of the war on drugs. It was 1970. That's when the war on drugs was declared by Richard Milhouse Nixon. It was funded by the federal government. And since that time, it's now been 40 years, we've spent well over $1 trillion, almost $1.5 trillion to fight this war. All we have to show for that money is we've made more than 41 million arrests for nonviolent drug offenses in this country. We've done everything we can possibly do to destroy the lives of those people who were arrested. And sadly, most of them are people of color. Most of them are poor people. And despite all this money so spent, despite all these lives destroyed, today drugs are cheaper, they're more potent, and they're far easier for our children to access than they were at the beginning of this bloody mess in 1970. That's why when I retired, I sat down with those other 4 police officers and we created Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And the reason we did it was looking at this from the viewpoint of law enforcement. We know that when we ended alcohol prohibition in 1933, the next morning, Al Capone and all his smuggling buddies were out of business, right? Remember that they were off our streets.
Yeah.
They were no longer out there killing each other to control that very lucrative market. They were no longer killing us police officers charged with fighting this useless war. They were no longer killing our children caught in crossfire and drive-by shootings. And these are all the things we experience today with the war on drugs. And we know that if we legalize these drugs, we can end the violence. We can end overdose deaths because we'll have control and regulation over what people are taking, which is the reason they die from overdose. They don't die because they shoot more and more dope. They die because they don't know how much of that tiny package of powder they're purchasing is really the drug and how much is the cutting agent. And once we start treating drug abuse as a health problem instead of a crime problem, we can actually help these millions of people, young people, whose lives were destroyed before they have a chance to even be educated, most of them.